Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Purdy Insurance. Visit Purdy Insurance on Market Street in Sunbury or visit online at purdyinsurance.com.
Ryan Snyder, On3.com, Blue White Illustrated. Welcome back, my friend. Great to have you with us.
You mentioned Dave Sims. He's like the most underrated play-by-play guy.
He's
I think
so good, and is such a good guy. I mean, I've known Dave for 30 years. I mean, maybe 35.
Yeah, I was just watching him on MLB Network a little bit ago. They were doing his play-by-play call, the home run they had to get the playoff the other night, and I think he's so underrated. That's
He is really underrated, you know. So it wasn't obviously the best of days, but what kind of turnout did they have on the recruiting side over the weekend?
Well, considering it was a monsoon, I don't know. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
It was about 20 or so, we'll say, true Division I prospects, you know, guys that probably not all of them are going to end up at a school like Penn State, but, you know, guys that will play at anywhere between a Temple to a Rutgers to a Maryland, you know, so that's not too bad of a showing. Out of the guys that are true Penn State level, I would say there is about, not including the committed players, you'd say about 7, 8, 9, something like that. And the original list was expected to be around a dozen, you know, couple top guys. Decided not to drive in that rain, and it's hard to say I could blame them, especially they're coming from like South Jersey and Maryland, D.C., you know, where it was just a downpour the whole way to get there. So, you know, considering the weather and all that, it wasn't too bad. You know, Penn State had Jameel Lyons and Joey Schlaffer and Javen Williams all back. Of course, they're committed guys. A few notables, too. Nair Daniels is a really good-looking 2024 offensive lineman, 6'7", 250 or 350, excuse me. Just, you know, they're trying to clearly get bigger on the offensive front. And, you know, having Nair was big. There's another offensive lineman, Juan Minaya, too, another really good-looking player. I think he's like 6'5"-ish, 320, a little bit smaller. But, you know, two true offensive tackle prospects. And that's clearly going to be a focus. You know, they'd love to get another one for 2023. And that'll clearly be a focus for 2024 as well. So some top guys, and, you know, they'll all focus now to Minnesota, really. That's going to be the big one.
Right, yeah, obviously, once they get to that game. What about a 2023 running back? Because we all know what the situation. They love the one that has verbal to them, but we all know that he's been banged up. So is there an idea of getting another one there?
They're certainly looking. You know, I'll be curious to see how it kind of plays out. Right now, I would say Chris Johnson is a player to keep an eye on. Out of I think it's Dillard in Florida. I think he's going to have interest in coming up for a visit, but I would probably have to lean towards Miami at the moment as far as you know, the school who should be considered the favorite. We have him at 5'11", 178. He's a 4-star prospect, right around the top 300 or so. There's real interest with Snyder, and of course they got to get him on campus, though. I mean, that's how it is.
Right.
Really, with all these Florida guys, man, you got to get them up, and for the most part, it's hard for them to visit if it's not an official visit either. So, if they can set that for maybe Minnesota or Ohio State, you know, you'll never rule anything out. But really, I mean, Chris is the only one who's really, we know Penn State has interest in, and then obviously we know he has interest as well. But, you know, what do we got? 3 more months here until anyone can sign. So we'll see if anything shakes out. But obviously with Devin Ford no longer part of the program, and then you have Nick Singleton, and you have the young guys emerging. I mean, not saying Kevon's going to leave, but you never know within the transfer portal era. It certainly makes sense to try and add another running back if you can.
All right, so that when you look at where they are with 23 right now, how many more openings do they potentially have before, was it December 15th, I think is going to be the early signing day?
So I think 3 is they can safely do, right? You can get to 23 and it doesn't cause too many headaches. But in the world of recruiting, you know, what's a signing day without a headache or two, right? So,
sure.
You know, I'm hesitant to push 23 too much because, as we see every year, once you get those coaching changes, you get a few top players starting to think things over again, and you know, Penn State gets an opportunity to add a 24th and say it's at a maybe not a key position, but the player's too good to pass up.
Right.
You got to add them. I mean, we see Penn State do this pretty regularly throughout the year. So I think 23 is the safe number. I think 24 is possible. I think 25 would be starting to stretch it a bit. But, of course, in the transfer portal era, you never know who's all going to leave. And if they had a large number of guys leaving, at the end of November, early December, that kind of changes everything. But then, of course, you got to get guys in on the portal too. So it's hard to do the math, as you know, Steve. But yeah. I think 23, 24 is the most realistic number at the moment.
Okay, so when you look at James Franklin, on Friday, for example, we know he choppered out of here. He also went to games. Track him. How did he spend his Friday?
How did he spend his Friday? He spent his Friday bouncing all over PA. A couple spots down in Malvern. There's a really good player committed, Peter Jones. He's committed to Notre Dame. You got to stop at Malvern. They're going to stay on Peter no matter what. So that was an important stop. I also saw Joey Schlafler in Exeter. So bouncing around a couple schools from that Lancaster down towards Philly area. I think there was maybe one other stop I'm not thinking off the top of my head. And then he also went up to Erie then to see Cooper Cousins, who's a really important 2024 player who's already, of course, committed to them. So James has been out on the road, I think, every Friday now. I believe he's done. He saw Johnny Shakir in New Jersey. He saw Quentin Martin out in Pittsburgh. He was when they were down in Alabama. They checked up on Dakari Nelson, who's of course is committed to them. There's one other one I think I'm missing off the top of my head, but they've been out on the road every week, and of course with the bye week coming up, this is when the entire staff will hit the road. So I'm still working to put together that list. I'm hoping to have it up here in the next day or two, and we'll have everybody covered over at BWI. But I would expect Wednesday to Saturday for pretty much the entire staff to be out on the road. Some will come back Saturday, but actually, I shouldn't say the entire staff Wednesday to Saturday. The entire staff will be more Friday, maybe early Thursday. Right. But you'll have some here Wednesday and some here Saturday, for practices and things like that.
How does it look right now in terms of starting to build, obviously, 24 at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they don't have a lot of commitments, but, man, they have a ton of guys who I would say they sit top three with. And now, of course, it's really early. I don't want to say top three, and I don't want to overthink it, I guess, with so long to go. But there's a lot of guys that have a ton of interest, a lot of top players too. And I just mentioned Quentin Martin. I've had people say that he's the best prospect to come out of Pennsylvania since Micah Parsons. So obviously that's a big name there, and he's a guy that I totally expect Penn State to be in the mix with as well. I think the region, one thing I would say is the region is setting up to be one of the best in recent years. I think I did the math not that long ago. We're setting up for about 40 or so four-star prospects throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. Of course, those numbers will change. It might dip into the high 30s. But just compared throughout Franklin's tenure here, I believe there's only one other year. I think it was around 2018 or so, which is of course, was Penn State's last massive class until last year. We saw those kind of numbers as far as that depth of four-star talent. So there's a lot of guys to pick and choose from. I would say that there's two guys right now, Dominic Nichols, the defensive end from Maryland, and an offensive lineman, Kevin Haywood, out of Archbishop Wood outside of Philadelphia. Those two guys, I feel like they're firmly leaning towards Penn State. I feel pretty confident in saying that at minimum, Penn State's going to be one of two schools they choose between. I think they should both end up here, though, and maybe it could be, but before the end of the year closes out. So I look at next year's class as their next opportunity to have a really massive class, because we're seeing five-star players and we're seeing high-end four-stars. And if you want to have a top 10 class, which we saw last year with Penn State, you got to get a couple five-stars in there, or it's just kind of hard to crack when you have all those other powerhouse schools getting a couple. So the talent is there for 2024. Like I said, Quentin's going to be a five-star. It's going to be a couple others, and then a bunch of top 100, top 150 guys. Let's see how it shakes out here as well. And of course, the other thing I'll mention is, like, fans are always trying to put together the board, right? Who's the top tight ends? Who's the top running backs? Who's the top whatever? We'll know so much more in 2.5 months from now.
Yes.
Once all that film comes through, once James and his staff are able to evaluate. I always tell people, beginning of January, once we get past this early signing period and get past the bowl game, that's when we can really sit down and figure out who their top 2024 guys are. There's a lot of offers that are out there, but some of those guys are going to fall off, and then other offers are going to go out. So give us about 2 months or so, and we'll really be able to lock down who those top guys are at this top position.
Ryan, Penn State's been this will be the last question because I know you have to run. But Penn State's been investing more in the locker room, the weight room, things like that. And they've been very public about doing that and the money that's been put into it. Student athletes have a wide variety of reasons why they select some place, and sometimes it's good enough to be just even with somebody else. Is that making a difference for them in recruiting what they're investing in?
I'm hearing guys talk about it more and more.
Yeah, okay.
We're hearing NIL more and more too, which is great for Penn State because that was an issue. James was open about it just a handful of months ago, and things are really starting to head in a positive direction.
And Dan Cabal and Andy Frank have made great inroads there. So
I was just going to give those guys a shout out too, man. They've done a great job, and of course, all the people starting collectives and whatnot. I mean, these guys deserve a lot of credit because this was a situation where 8 months ago, I'm not saying people were pushing the panic button, but they were certainly making it clear that there were some concerns. So I think obviously facilities and all that stuff are incredibly important. Penn State obviously just did a great job with the last building. They're going to continue doing it too. I mean, James has made it clear they're never going to be done. And, if you look at the Texas A&M facility, the Texas Tech facility, I mean, anyone who's seen Georgia's knows there's a lot to catch up to in this world. I feel like that's in a good spot. That's going to be there. It's still NIL because even no matter, I mean, I can throw numbers out there. I don't know any numbers that are accurate, but just we'll say a couple million, right? Well, that's never going to be good enough. You're going to need a couple million more and a couple million more after that. It's just the world we're in now. So I think the most important thing is that all those things are in motion. The recruits are seeing that, and for the first time in a long time, it's not just about family atmosphere and academics, which obviously, yes, it's incredibly important. I don't want to overlook that stuff.
Right. It's all part of it.
That was always the message, though, right? It was always just like they recruit me harder than everyone else. They have a family. They have great academics, and you need to sell those three things. But guess what? If you want to get those 5-star guys, you got to sell a whole lot more than that too. And that's kind of what we're seeing more and more now. This class now, 2023, 2024, and probably a little bit into 2025 are going to be massively important for NIL. I'm kind of a person that thinks that hopefully by 2025, 2026, we get this more of an even playing field or things get sorted out where it's not just the wild, wild west. But I still think we have another class or two where that's just going to be the reality, and you got to do everything you can to keep up with everyone else.
Great perspective as always. Ryan, thank you so much. Appreciate you so much, and thanks so much for the time.
Of course, Whiteout Week. We'll catch up with me then. We got a lot to discuss here in a couple
weeks. Yes, we do. Right. Thank you so much.
Take care, Steve.